keeping the peace, protecting the people, feeding the people, sheltering the people, and educate the people, right? So those five categories that's your government. That's, I guess, society's goal, right? I mean, all those things are.
This one's interesting because I feel like I've had mixed feelings about insurance for years, especially life insurance specifically. I've always really kind of leaned more towards term insurance until I started learning more and more about, the benefits of actually having whole life insurance.
I think we read or listened to, depending on what you're all doing, the first through end of chapter 3 is what the assignment was. Hopefully everybody did get through it. And I guess the first introduction, in the thing was the same author that we listened to with the tax-free wealth strategies. So hopefully it is kind of a building block is what I was hoping for from the initial conversations that he kind of opened everything up to with that first book, focusing more on the investment side of everything. It's all taxes related to, which we'll see how my feeling is on that. And I think, David, you may get the most out of this book because so far, at least, I don't know, skipping over the introductory information to some extent, just because I think it was kind of more of the background on the author, which we talked about, and some of just the general concepts that we had talked about from that last book. Does anybody have anything they want to add from the prelogue? Is that the right word, prelogue? And the introduction stuff before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of chapter 1?
Yeah, it was pretty similar to the previous book. It was a little deja vu in a way of similar introduction, similar recommendation, and it was a good reminder of who the author was.
So I would say this author does a very good job at making taxes not so bleh. I don't really know a better way to say it because, and it's funny because I've been talking with a couple of other like CPAs that I've worked with and, a couple of other colleagues and whatnot. And a lot of them have, some of them do tax, some of them don't. And so the ones that don't, a lot of their complaints are mostly around, how confusing it is. And it's just kind of boring. And so half of me's starting to recommend a lot of books to some of them. But honestly, it kind of makes it a little less scary, like getting into, and it's actually starting to get a little exciting to me. But I don't know if it's just this artist or, just this guy specifically or, what it is. Maybe now I'm just starting to understand it more overall and I'm getting excited about it. But
I definitely I agree with you in the sense of it takes a little bit of the dryness of reading code section.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of also, from my perspective, whether I'm reading municipal code or, OC, Georgia code section, the statutory information is very dry and it is tough to kind of get through sometimes, like, oh, this just sucks. But adding the conversational pieces to it, the real world examples that he kind of pulls into it, and the little back end stories when he's talking about these, the IRC code section, which is very boring, but how that kind of relates and kind of the back and forth that he adds to it, I agree. It's a nice little piece that makes it a little bit more user friendly, even for people that don't want to get directly involved on the tax side like you, David, but more just having a better understanding and be able to at least open conversations with their service providers.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Anybody else, any comments or anything as far as the initial opening, salvo, I guess? No? Okay. So moving on to chapter 1, kind of calling it partner, or the author calls it partnering with the government, which is another way of, the way he kind of talks about tax is always interesting. The tax code itself is don't worry about what you have to pay, worry about all the other things that are kind of going onto it, and the incentives that is built into it when you're living your kind of financial life. Look at the roadmap that the IRS or the government has provided to it is a nice way of doing it. And they're kind of the same thing. The way the title is partnering with, partner with the government. You're not following their rules. They're not your dictator. They're not telling you what to do. They're making it as a cooperative. So even just that whole concept of it, I thought was a nice, taking does he take the edge off taxes for sure? And that is definitely a nice feeling that I'm getting as I read more and more about his books. Obviously the first one we're talking about in chapter 1 is really kind of setting the stage for the entire book as well, and kind of really allocating really what we're going to go. I would say it's more of an introduction to some extent, but is definitely a full chapter on it. The 3 characterizations as far as the object of the games, if you will, rules of the game. 1, partner with the government. They're your partner in this thing, and figure out how to work together. The common goal goal of keeping all your money for yourself and also the betterment of society. If you want to kind of have some altruistic needs here, ultimately we are kind of dealing with some of the other things that the government is doing. It is for society. It is, yes, somewhat selfish to keeping your own money, which is a nice thing, but all the things that they're doing is kind of bettering of the society. With the role of government is, better society. So kind of keep that in mind. The partner with the government, understanding the rules and play by the rules, which is the bigger key. Everybody here is okay, pay taxes. That's not the rule. There's so much more to it. Understand them and play by the rules. Again, they kind of made it very clear that we're not looking for loopholes. We're not looking for gray areas. We are looking for the black and white. Here's kind of what to do, and here's how you don't pay taxes. You don't need to bend. You don't need to lie. You don't need to cheat. Just follow the rules, and you'll get to the zero number just as quickly and probably a little more securely. Understand the rules, play by the rules, and then again the same thing is kind of to build wealth, not to defer, not to reduce. Basically, the goal is all to eliminate taxes. So partner with the government, understand the rules, and figure out how to build your wealth so you don't ever have to pay taxes on that wealth that you're created. Any comments on the 3 rules that at least I got? I'm not sure there's something else in there that I may have missed. I don't know. I'm probably a little bit later. I probably should have spent probably another day or two doing some of the reviews, so I do apologize. So any comments on the 3 rules?
So from the perspective of like partnering with the government, when he explained it, kind of going through it almost makes it a little easier to plan, right? If you kind of think about the government as like your part, right? Because I feel like it's kind of easier, at least for me, to plan for, okay, if you're partnered with somebody, what is that split going to look like at the end of the year? Well, don't forget your third partner or that other partner, the IRS, because they're going to want a percentage. It's nice to kind of know that up front, right? And that's almost like a good way of explaining to clients, okay, well, you want to do this because you got to remember your other partner, right? Your partner's going to want 10, 20, 30% unless you're doing the things that your partner really wants you to do, right? If you're going against your partner, I mean, by all means, that's fine. But as your accountant, I'm going to tell you that's not going to be very favorable. It's going to stop, right? But I don't know, kind of going through this, it really it kind of gives me some thoughts on kind of how to explain it a little easier, because I think right now, sure, I'm starting to grasp a lot of the stuff that he's, kind of laying down. But if you were to tell me to turn around, like, hey, David, can you explain to me what he said? I'd be like, you can read it again. So, but that's kind of how I've been feeling about it. And I almost appreciate, especially nowadays, kind of like, whether it's the 3 rules or whether it's just, the same kind of like, you can almost systemize that, right? Those same 3 rules, as long as you're looking at those same 3 rules for every situation, it kind of helps you, it kind of helps guide during your entrepreneur journey.
So I actually really like his perspective. I feel like the last book we read made the government feel very dictatorship, whereas I feel like this book makes it feel not as threatening or not as scary with the government on your taxes. And I like the equation that he gives us. It was like a 90-10 split or something. Like, we're responsible for 90% of the cost, but then the government takes on 1% of that or 10% of that or whatever it was as far as the tax break goes. And so the first book we read, it was like, okay, why is the government wanting this? Or why, like this to me just gave it a better definition as to why the government would do and give the tax breaks. And the way he explained, like the housing and the research and development and the 7 different areas of life that you can kind of get those tax breaks in, it just felt better, I think, the way he described how the government works through taxes, because, to your point, it is a partnership, right? And David, to your point, knowing what we can keep in our pockets by doing XYZ at the beginning makes it easier to allocate that money to something that it's going to be beneficial to in the long run. Whereas like right now, when we do taxes, it's like at the end of the year, it's like, oh, here's $10,000, or oh, we're taking $10,000. Like it's crazy. But I think understanding where the government wants us putting money in and that kind of stuff will allow us to make better decisions on the back end. And I really liked how he described it as the partnership as opposed to obeying or listening to the government like the last book described it. The last book just kept, well, if you behave the way the government wants you to, well, no, the government just is not really behaving the way the government wants you to. it's more partnering with the government to doing the tasks and the jobs and the whatever it is that they want. And they do take on some financial responsibility, right? It gave the government, I think, some ownership and the responsibility of the financials, and talked a little bit about what they're losing, in essence, by losing those taxes and what we're gaining. So I really like that perspective and how he explained everything in this chapter. It just made this process feel better.
Less intimidating.
Right.
Yeah, no, for sure, Laura, and kind of playing what you just kind of brought up. That's kind of what I got. This chapter one really kind of lays out the whole thing for the entire book and for each subsequent chapter that comes after it, right? So the kind of the three different main characterizations: partner with the government, understand the rules, build wealth, and don't pay tax, right? How are we doing that, or why are we doing that? I got five things of why the government does all this stuff, right? I got keeping the peace, protecting the people, feeding the people, sheltering the people, and educate the people, right? So those five categories that's your government. That's, I guess, society's goal, right? I mean, all those things are all society things that betterment of society, keeping food, shelter, water, all that good stuff falls within that, and that's kind of the parameters that the rest of the tax code comes down to, right? So in doing that, when you're looking for different things, those are the five, in my opinion, key positions that we're looking for as far as what is the benefit? Like, why does the government do all this stuff? Like, why do they got tax benefits, right?
So we just finished reading through chapters 4, 5, and 6. Greg, I won't steal your thunder. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Everybody doing okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So yes, we ran through chapters 4, 5, and 6 for this week. Kind of chapters 4, we were talking about investments, and so obviously we're talking about different types of investments that seem to be the most tax-friendly types of investments and things to do with your money in that sense. So for chapter 4, we're talking about real estate types of investments. Chapter 5, energy type investments, and chapter 6, different types of agriculture. So I'm figuring that we kind of go through the conversation and discuss on what we thought about these individual chapters. Is not breaking up on a chapter 4 first, chapter 5 first, then chapter 6. I just figure 4, 5, and 6, those are kind of the ones that we had talked about. I thought a couple different things that kind of piqued my brain to some extent on some of the personal stuff were some of the tax incentives for solar and how that works. I like the idea of having solar, more for not so much because it's green, but because my doomsday personality, which is not the biggest thing, but we have a little bit of storage closet downstairs, so some food and things like that happen when the hell freezes over, if you will. But also more for the continuity of electrical services and being off grid if I need to. From that perspective, I think it's really a nice thing to have some solar and have some battery power backup as well. It is kind of expensive, and so much of it with these books is I don't know enough, and I like the idea of almost getting paid from tax incentives to install solar in your house. And I really don't understand how it really works. I didn't follow all those numbers, but it seems like if I buy a system, finance it in essence, and put as little down as possible, I will get enough tax breaks that'll cover my financing. Is the way I interpret.
So this actually made me think of somebody that I actually got to talk to recently. So he's also an accountant. He does taxes on a regular basis in Virginia.
Yeah.
And so he was essentially kind of doubling up on kind of certain tax advantages. So not solar specifically, but what he was doing was as he grew his rental portfolio, he would essentially, to your point, finance as much of it as possible. And then whenever he finished his, running his tax returns, obviously like he'd get revenue from that. But then any money he would get back taxes, because as an accountant, a lot of the times we invest in things because we know in the tax code we're going to get a decent refund. And so essentially it's almost like a way of, the way he's explaining it, it's like, if you planned it out from an AP perspective, and so as an accountant, we know to kind of slow it down. So like, if they give you terms, obviously you pay the end of the terms, not so that it's late, so that you hold on cash for a bit longer. Because if you plan it out to where you put one of these investments in place and say, let the year roll over, get it on your tax return, send it to your accountant on time, and get whatever refunds you get from it, then that money you end up rolling over and kind of hand over what you owe, if you planned it out right to begin with. But that's almost what it sounds like he's saying. And when you think of it from that standpoint, what he's saying is nuts. It's like, your investments, you essentially just get them funded by the government and debt. So it's like...
He's definitely a big fan of using debt, that's for sure.
Oh,
actually,
Yeah.
I mean, and the real estate side, I mean, that's just bananas. I mean, leverage, and get some money to leverage. I mean,
Right. So piggybacking off of that as well, I loved his comment where he said a lot of the times in his experience, he'll notice if someone's kind of adverse to using debt, a lot of the times it kind of comes from that they don't have the confidence that the asset that they're purchasing with that debt actually going to make a return.
Right.
And I mean, when you kind of think about it from that standpoint, it's like, okay, well, if you're strategically using the debt, I mean, what's wrong with it once you start putting in these tax plans? Hi, Laura.
When it's amazing, like, hi, Laura.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was a few minutes late. We were moving from one spot of the hospital to another.
It's amazing to think of it. When you buy $1 million home, you didn't just buy $1 million home. You only spent, $101,000 on the home, not $1 million. And so you get to live there for $100,000, not $1 million, even though eventually you'll hopefully pay it off or not. But it's a different perspective to looking at buying a business or buying a house or anything, that you're not paying that whole price. And if you sell it in a year, it only cost you $130,000 to live there. And then you still sold it and made, maybe 1.1 million now.
Right.
yeah, the use of debt, and in all the different things. I mean, I think one of the chapters, we kind of vominos from debt. It might have been a later chapter that I was looking at.
The book was on like chapter 8. I think you're reading ahead.
Well, I went all the way to chapter 9, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, we're kind of focused on, again, missing blending chapters to some extent. But yeah, but 4, 5, and 6 definitely use some of the debt financing for the energy projects and stuff like that. Now, what's everybody's thoughts in regards to? Because I think the solar panel can somewhat focus on the personal side, but it seems like a lot of this is how do you invest in entities that are doing these type of services, right? Did you guys catch anything else on the personal side that you can kind of use this for your own personal things, as far as, again, like putting solar on a house, using the tax incentives and rebates and all this stuff? And I know rebates are one thing, but I've always, again, electric cars, rebates, $7,500 rebate that you get for that when you buy a certain car, a couple other things. But it seems like there's so much more taxes that your tax rules that are advantageous outside of just a straight rebate.
You're talking about
Did anybody think about that stuff? I mean, I think for solar and your house, I think you can utilize some of these tax advantages for personal use, right? Where a lot of stuff he's talking about is business wise. Anybody else kind of pick up on some of the personal things that you can be doing with the tax code on the trying to benefit your personal life?
When you talk about solar, that's a huge one, because what I've started recommending to most of my clients is I try to get them to talk to me and kind of let me know what's going on, like just in general, like including personal things. Because if somebody tells me, yeah, I'm getting work done on my house, my first question is, what are you doing? Like, what are you adding? Is there anything else you can add? Can I make some suggestions? Because then from there, I go look at the tax code to kind of find out, okay, well, what credits could you kind of get added on to that? Because that, to your point, that one's not necessarily business or personal. You could do it on either side.
Right.
There's the panels, the windows, and the electrical stations, like the cars. And I don't know the difference really between the credits and the rebate. But I know that there's windows as well. So, David, I would like you and I to look into this, because like if we are flipping, does it make sense if we have to replace the windows to go in and put the energy efficient windows and stuff in there as opposed to just a window? Like I was kind of wondering this thing from a flipping perspective. Like,
so
would it make
that's a solid maybe, because for rentals and like income generating long term, yes. For flips, I don't know, because as we start to do more of them in the tax code, we actually get labeled as a broker dealer, more like a broker dealer than anything, and so flips actually become inventory and not fixed assets. So I don't.
Correct.
I
No,
don't
no,
know.
correct. But I wonder if from like when you sell the house, even though it's inventory, if we add the stuff to the inventory, does that create?
Well, I don't know, because I've never looked at it for inventory. Like if it was not inventory, then I'd say, oh, absolutely. But I don't know for sure.
I think we should look into that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I think along the same lines of what type of depreciation or some of that stuff. Because right, so something like the farm equipment, I know it's looking at that. It's a 100% depreciated on the minute you buy it, right? So if you're fixing and flipping, and then you're putting a solar system or some kind of that's an automatic something immediately you buy it. Then if you're running it through the business, and then you on your end of the year, okay, I made X amount of dollars on flips or whatever, but I also have a lot of these credits and stuff like that because I installed solar windows. Sure, I only had the property for a month, but as soon as I bought it, I was able to depreciate the whole thing all up front, as opposed to over a 5-year, 20-year, 27-year period, things along that nature. I don't know if that has any difference. Anybody pick up on anything like that?
So
That part I'm not sure of.
I might have missed your question a little bit. No.
No.
Sorry.
Well, right, because certain things, especially with, I know on the farm side, a lot of it is if you buy a piece of farm equipment or seeds or something, you're able to, some of it you depreciate or you get something over a period course of the life, right? It's building 20 years or whatever the case may be. But certain things you can do all up front immediately as soon as you buy it.
Mhm.
So
So
Are you talking about like when he was talking about the farm building?
all right, so I guess the floor is mine. I apologize about running late here, and I appreciate everybody's time. And welcome to Book Club, September 19th, 12:44 start time. Did everybody get through the final? I guess it's three chapters with the bonus chapter, which is actually ended up being four. But the third chapter was really just a summary of everything, and the bonus chapter was something else, how to buy the Ferrari. So who's buying what car for free?
I haven't chose the car, but I love the plan.
I want an electric car. I haven't decided though.
Well, you're doing both things, huh? You're going for the standard deductions and then making the government pay for your car as well as you're trying to take advantage of the EV credits and everything else. So you're doing 2 in 1. Very nice. You're playing smart. So, I got a little bit lost in the qualified and non-qualified investment world, if you will. I wish you gave me a little bit more information when I was kind of reading through it. I thought it was kind of important because actually it kind of comes across my table a lot in regards to when I am setting up equity plans for companies. A lot of times I'm kind of going through, are they qualified or unqualified stock options that we are giving to these key benefits. In the past, I've always heard, qualified, that's the way to go. That's what we need to have. But I think that is definitely the traditional thinking of defer taxes, defer taxes, defer taxes. Well, again, after reading the book, we don't want to defer, we don't want to pay, period. So qualified, I guess, has a lot of rules, a lot of whatnot, but I like the unqualified now even, and I like them more than the qualified, but I got a little bit lost. Anybody really make heads and tails of the differences between them and how they really work? Did anybody kind of catch that? Curious.
I don't remember him talking about it in the book.
Oh, maybe it's only in the virtual book, the ebook.
Maybe.
Did you listen or read?
I listened.
You listened. Okay.
Yeah.
It was retirement. We're talking about the retirement plan chapter. Is it not?
Yeah, I'm talking about like the specific differences between like non-qualified and qualified. I don't know if he got into the nitty-gritty of those, but I know like for non-qualified, it's a fantastic plan, especially for high income earners, because with qualified plans, because it, to his point, it's so regulated by the government. The government basically want to control the whole part of it. With non-qualified plans, you don't really have those same limits, like the contribution limit. So a lot of the times that's the first benefit to most people, because by the time you've given your $5,500 or $6,500 or whatever for the year, it's like, well, damn, if I've got more money to put into it, like I can't benefit from, a tax deferred account. It's like, well, you just use a non-qualified account, and they're completely different. But I don't remember him going into like the specific like key details.
And nothing in your accounting background to help me. Otherwise, is that a separate conversation I got to pay for?
Maybe the latter. So basically the benefits are just, you're not going to have those same like caps. And then he kind of talked about a lot of the benefits in there as well. So like, for instance, there's not so much control on how you can use it, because you're not having to do the same rules that the government's going to place on them. Like you can't take the money out. You can't, put so much in, because they don't have their hands in it.
I think that'll be a conversation that you and I need to kind of have offline outside of the book club without getting too much in the weeds in that one particular product. But I did kind of raise some important things that I want to need to address for as I'm advising my business clients and setting up those equity plans. Definitely seemed like a nice little piece. Anybody get anything, I guess, insurance and retirement accounts were the two bigger ones that we talked about in this one. The insurance, what I gathered was, it's interesting because it's a part of one of the 7 possible ways to invest, but did anybody actually catch what the benefits are with that type of things, other than you can't write them off for your insurance, your life insurance policy premiums, you can't write off, is what I gathered from traditional stuff, definitely for term. And did anybody have any insight as far as, I don't know, what the advantages of and what the investment benefits and tax benefits for life insurances?
Confused here just because you always hear insurance is like the last piece to the puzzle. And I felt like your financial get everything else in place, and then that's or whole term life insurance. Like there's like part of that's kind of like the end. And he was talking about a whole bunch of different other ones as well. And so I just am a little confused as to like what do we do now? Which one do we do last? And how do we make it all set in place? And it's just, to me, I don't know that I think it's more of a peace of mind than a tax break is what I felt like in the chapter.
So this one's interesting because I feel like I've had mixed feelings about insurance for years, especially life insurance specifically. I've always really kind of leaned more towards term insurance until I started learning more and more about, the benefits of actually having whole life insurance. And he kind of talks about it in here a little bit. So like the cash surrender value, that essentially gives you, so I think some people get mixed up on the idea of you can have certain whole life policies where that cash value you can like invest it, and so it's the same as like a 401k where they have like the very low risk stuff, so you're not making money there. Where you actually make money is access to capital, because you can borrow against it to turn around and make money outside of it, right? But at that point, as he talks about earlier in the book, you got to be confident about your returns to pay that money back. But I mean, you match all those up, they all benefit. Also within like the whole life realm, there's actually two portions to the premium. So like when you pay the premium, there's a savings portion and there's an actual premium portion. What he talks about in there, which I believe is right, there's a portion of that can be deducted in some cases, and he talks about it in the book. But to your point, unless you have some kind of whole life insurance policy, you're not getting any benefit from term until you actually see, that like someone else may see the benefit from that. Like your heirs may see that tax benefit, but you wouldn't.
Can you say something, Natalie, also?
Well, I was just thinking the story that he shared about how his parents had all those units, and then the mom needed or got a report that somebody fell on steps. And so she called her insurance agent. And in the end, they never had to do a payout. So I think like what Laura was saying, where it was almost, the benefits of a good person to fight on your team that you're close to, same thing like having a good tax person that either they make you pay all the money and don't do a double check, or they really help you to save money and cut costs and really there for you. So I think there might be good and bad insurance agents.
Well, there's definitely good and bad in insurance agents. And always a little something always sticks in my head when it comes to insurance companies, or again, whenever you're kind of doing, along now that we were talking about as far as a liability insurance policy or premium, something like that. Because I assume those premiums are definitely, tax benefits in that sense. You get to write them off as an expense, for your normal insurance needs. But the insurance policies are bananas. I mean, they're just like very, very legalese. They're very, very thick, hard reading. Attorney, I hate reading them. Like, it's like, what the heck is it? It's just like going round and round and round and round and round, and we go. It's like, what do I actually have coverage or not? Whenever we're shopping for insurance, the biggest thing is write what you want. I want coverage for A, I want coverage for B, I want coverage for C, and send that to the insurance agent. Say, listen, this is what I'm expecting. They say, great, here's your policy. And then all of a sudden that policy does not cover because they didn't read the policy either, right? So they just, oh yeah, it's covered, right? Meanwhile, but now we have a written statement saying this is what I want, and the insurance agent that's representing the company has agreed, saying here's the policy that'll cover that, without actually pointing it. And even though it's wrong, you can then potentially go after that insurance company for coverage because the insurance agent went on and said this is what I want, and they replied said then this is what you want, right? So they're kind of giving you the policy based on your layman terms as far as what you want coverage for. So definitely kind of reduce it to a layman's term and have your insurance agent verify that is what you're getting coverage for. And don't ask who cares about whether it's in there or not. Just as long as they say it is, even if it's not, you can have a legal claim against them for coverage because they represented that they wasn't going to be covered on that as an agent. So you always keep that in mind when you're dealing with insurance companies. As a little food for thought.
Yeah, definitely learning to document.
That's right, TikTok on that.